Alright, so we're now in the year 1916. I'm looking forward to watching more from Epic History's World War One. I kind of just want to jump right into it, guys. I'm not going to spend time making a long intro. If you want to watch the original video, I always put the link down below. With that said, without any further ado, let's learn about what transpired in the year 1916.
World War I was supposed to have been a short and glorious war. But by 1916, a new kind of industrialized warfare had seen the death toll soar into the millions, with no end in sight. Naval blockades were beginning to cause shortages of food and fuel across Europe, while thousands of women had entered the workforce, replacing the men sent to fight in their millions. All sides were preparing for a long war. The war has raged for a year and a half as the Allies continue to battle the Central Powers, recently joined by Bulgaria. At sea, the British maintain their naval blockade of Germany, preventing the import of food and other vital raw materials. Germany has retaliated with a U-boat blockade of Britain, but has to limit its attacks to avoid provoking the neutral USA, whose citizens have already been caught in the crossfire. On the Western Front, French, British and Belgian troops are dug in opposite the Germans, both sides trapped in the bloody stalemate of trench warfare. On the Eastern Front, the Russians have ended their long retreat and stabilized the line, but their army has suffered huge losses. On the Italian front, Italian troops have launched a series of costly, unsuccessful attacks against strong Austro-Hungarian defences. While on the Balkan front, the Central Powers have overrun Serbia, whose army is forced to make a bitter retreat through the Albanian mountains. Now, on the 5th of January, Austro-Hungarian troops attack Montenegro. They are delayed at the Battle of Mojkovac, but 3 weeks later, Montenegro is forced to surrender. On the Caucasus front, the Russians launch a surprise winter offensive against Ottoman Turkish forces. 6 weeks later, Russian troops occupy the city of Erzurum. In April, they capture the Black Sea port of Trebizond. Meanwhile, the British transport 2 motorboats to Lake Tanganyika in Africa. They finally arrive after a 10,000-mile trip by sea and land, and help the British seize control of the strategic lake from local German forces. The same month, in German Cameroon, German troops besieged on Mora Mountain for 18 months finally surrender to the Allies. It marks the end of the Cameroon campaign. On the Western Front, the Germans unleash a devastating assault on the French fortress town of Verdun. German General Erich von Falkenhayn knows France will defend this symbolic town to the last man. His plan, in his own words, is to bleed France white in its defense. It is the strategy of attrition. Verdun becomes one of the most terrifying battles of the war, a mincing machine, where infantry divisions are destroyed almost as fast as they can be fed into the line. In Britain, 1 million men have already volunteered for military service, but the government realizes it won't be enough. Britain becomes the last major power to introduce conscription. That spring, on the Western Front,
Yeah, Like, I keep saying this throughout the video, so I apologize for any repeat, but yeah, it's just the numbers are insane how big war has gotten. I mean, you know, we've gone from like what, like nearly 100,000 to now like millions and millions, and it's like, yeah, millions aren't doing it anymore. We need even more, like, you know, it's like it's just the scale of all of it, you know, and only gets bigger. Though I don't plan on covering any war or history after this, so this is probably the furthest we'll ever go on this channel. But yeah, it's just insane, you know. And yeah.
British troops are the last to be issued with steel helmets. The nature of trench warfare produces a high proportion of head wounds. The German Stahlhelm, the French Adrian helmet, and the British Mark I steel helmet offer limited protection from shell splinters and shrapnel. Neutral Portugal has been cooperating with the British, which seems to offer the best chance of holding on to her African colony, Portuguese Angola. On the 9th of March, Germany retaliates by declaring war on Portugal. On the Eastern Front, Russia launches an attack near Lake Narok to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun, but it's a disaster. There are 100,000 Russian casualties, and the attack fails to divert any German troops from the fighting at Verdun. In Dublin, Irish Republicans launch an armed revolt against British rule. It becomes known as the Easter Rising, and is put down after 6 days of street fighting. In the Middle East, after a 5-month siege, British forces at Kut surrender. General Townsend leads 9,000 British and Indian soldiers into captivity. About half later die from starvation or disease. Britain wants Arab support in its fight against the Ottoman Empire, so it's promised Arab leaders an independent Arab state after the war. But now, Britain and France...
I wonder if he's gonna bring up Lawrence of Arabia, or... wait. Okay, good, yeah. So, Lawrence of Arabia is, you know, basically... if you've seen the movie starring Peter O'Toole, had a hand to play in the Arab revolt, so I've been wondering, like, I wonder if he's gonna bring him up. But, yeah, I mainly know him because of, you know, the film.
France secretly signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement, planning after the war to divide the Middle East into British and French zones of control. Unaware of this deal, Hussein bin Ali, Sharif of Mecca, leads the Arabs in revolt against Turkish Ottoman rule. In the Battle of Mecca, his forces seize control of the Holy City. On the Italian front, Austro-Hungarian forces launch a surprise attack at Asiago. Italian defences give way. Austro-Hungarian troops are poised to break through into northern Italy. That month in the North Sea, the German High Seas Fleet clashes with the British Grand Fleet at the Battle of Jutland. In the only major naval battle of the war, the British suffer heavier losses, but claim victory as the German fleet withdraws and does not re-emerge from its base for the rest of the war. For the summer of 1916, the Allies have planned major simultaneous offensives against the Central Powers, from east and west. Now they are needed more than ever to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun and the Italians at Asiago. The Russians launched their attack first. On the Eastern Front, General Alexei Brusilov has carefully maintained the element of surprise. His troops break through the enemy lines, in some places advancing 60 miles and taking 200,000 prisoners. This brilliant, though costly, Russian attack achieves its aim, as the Central Powers are forced to redeploy troops from other fronts to shore up the line. At sea, British cruiser HMS Hampshire, en route to Russia, hits a mine and sinks off Orkney. Among the 650 dead is Britain's iconic Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener. 3 days later, in the Adriatic, Italian troopship Principe Umberto is sunk by a German submarine. It's the deadliest sinking of the war, with 1,900 lives lost. On the Western Front, Britain and France launched their major summer offensive.
Yeah, so I really like learning about the naval aspects because, like I said, we haven't really delved into like naval warfare. We covered like what the Battle of Trafalgar, the HMS Victory series by Epic History, but yeah, naval warfare is something we haven't covered much on this channel. So I really like learning about, you know, how it's going. I think that's probably the most interesting aspect so far, I'm finding, at least in this one video particular. And yeah.
The Battle of the Somme. Hopes are high for a breakthrough, but the first day is a disaster. A long Allied artillery bombardment fails to knock out German defences, and waves of British infantry are cut down by machine gun fire as they advance into no man's land. In the space of a few hours, the British suffer 57,000 casualties, a third of them killed. It's the worst day in the history of the British Army. But more attacks are ordered, and the battle will rage for another 5 months.
My goodness. Freaking 5 months of that. That's awful. And actually the Battle of the Somme, I believe, is the next video. So we will be covering that next time. So I'll save some of my thoughts for that video. But, boy, that is really the attrition that kind of gets it, huh? It's like, just like with trench warfare, it really, you know, a large part of World War I, when talking about it, it always comes up with trench warfare. It's like almost like intertwined heavily, like, and associated with this war in particular. And it really is just like, yeah, a war of attrition, right? And it just becomes this slogging match. And yeah, it's funny because, like he mentioned, a lot of people expected this to go a lot quicker, right? And it did not go that quick. It went on, and it's just, like I said, I have like a certain, like, nothing but respect for the soldiers who fought in this, and I just like feel like, oh my goodness, you poor people. Like, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Like, that's awful, you know? Like my heart kind of like really like bleeds for all these people.
Encouraged by the Russian advance, Romania joins the Allies. But despite an initially successful advance into Transylvania, Romania quickly faces a counter-offensive from German, Bulgarian and Austro-Hungarian forces. The Allied force at Salonika tries to support Romania by launching their own offensive towards Monastir. With Serbian troops in the lead, there are small gains, but dogged Bulgarian resistance prevents a breakthrough. On the Western Front, General von Falkenhayn finally calls off the attack at Verdun. The French army has honoured their commander General Nivelle's promise. Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass. But victory comes at a terrible...
You shall not pass! I'm sorry, I got into Lord of the Rings, which interestingly enough, I believe Tolkien fought in World War I. and that there was inspiration for Lord of the Rings because, you know, of what he went through. And, yeah. So yeah, he served, and yeah, I remember in one of my English classes that we did kind of learn a bit about, like, World War One. Some of the writers who served in this war and came out from it. So, and just kind of studying literature after, you know, this war and how just things were different. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm an English major in university. So yeah.
Terrible price. 365,000 casualties.
Oh my god.
The Germans lose almost as many.
Like I said, it's just the scope, right? Like, we went from, like, all the videos we covered, right? Like, you lose, like, 70,000 men. It's like, oh my gosh, what an unmitigated disaster. And it's like, you know, like, back then, right? And then now it's just looking at this, it's like, we'd be lucky to just lose, like, 80,000 men. You know? It's like, it really goes to show you, right? Just how just insane this all is.
Verdun remains one of the bloodiest battles in human history. For his defeat at Verdun, Falkenhayn is sacked, and Germany's heroes of the Eastern Front, von Hindenburg and Ludendorff, take command in the west. Meanwhile, the Battle of the Somme continues. Near the village of Flers, the British introduce a new weapon they hope can break the deadlock of the trenches. It is called the tank. But
yes, I had been waiting, and I believe it's the Battle of Somme that, like, I was saving it for that video, but I've been waiting for the tank to show up. Goodbye, horses. Goodbye, elephants. Hello, sexy tank. But yeah, like I said, I was really fascinated in, like, looking at accounts of the first tank, like, how did soldiers react to it, because, like, you know, like, a lot of these guys must have grown up, right, like, with an older idea of warfare, like, you know, like, Napoleonic-esque, you know, cavalry charges and whatnot, like, almost like an idealized version of war. And then this war was just a beyond, like I mentioned before, sobering reality with all this new technology. You got zeppelins, you got submarines, you got, you know, chemical warfare with mustard gas, you got trench warfare, and then you introduce the tank, which also just what a shock this must have been, right? Like, just a complete, like, everything has changed. War isn't what we thought it was. All this new stuff that's never been seen before suddenly being unveiled as everyone's pulling out these new technological advancements, and, you know, it's just like, yeah, it's just like a complete change in everything. Though I will say, one thing I liked about the advancement of war is, you know, less animal deaths. You know, don't get me wrong, cavalry charges I think are cool with, like, horses, and, like, war elephants I find really cool and interesting, but it is nice that, you know, we kind of retired the animal, you know, as we just have, like, automobiles and tanks, and just, you know, war got better for animals in that regard, that we're not really using them anymore for battle. But yeah, it's just like, could you just imagine, like, not knowing what a tank is and then seeing this walk up to you? Though I know early tanks are not as great as modern tanks, obviously, but they had their kinks about them, but still, it's just like the shock value, right? At first, just seeing something like this roll up to you, like, the shock value would be enough. But that's also kind of another thing, I think. It's like, yeah, all these weapons are being introduced, and at first, yeah, it's the shock value of, you know, having the element of surprise. For a moment there, you kind of have a monopoly on something. But then eventually, the thing with us humans is just like, after the shock wears off, we think, okay, how can we get one of those now? You know, like, and then it just becomes an arms race, right? As we just all try to get the same weaponry, and then also, who can make this weaponry even more effective, faster? It just becomes this, like, you know, that's really all war is, right? Like, a new tactic, a new weapon is unveiled. You know, for a while, whoever's the one to introduce it has a monopoly, has the advantage, but then everyone starts kind of copying and taking it, and then it becomes, you know, just everyone it just keeps going and building and building, even up to World War II, with, like, the introduction of the atom bomb. It's like, we just keep building, right? And yeah, I think that's the most frightening thing about, you know, I guess war, you could say. But yeah, I'm happy he's mentioned the tank. This is kind of what I've been wanting the entire series, just for him to bring up the tank.
Despite some small successes, the first tanks are too few in number and too prone to mechanical failure to make any real impact.
I have concluded a very fragile.
On the Eastern Front, Russia's Brusilov offensive comes to an end. Casualty estimates vary wildly, but it's clear both sides have suffered catastrophic losses. Neither the Russian nor the Austro-Hungarian army ever fully recovers. On the Italian front, heavy fighting rages throughout the autumn, as Italian forces make repeated, costly assaults against Austro-Hungarian positions along the Isonzo River. The Battle of the Somme comes to an end amid autumn rain and mud. The Allies have advanced 10 miles at the cost of 600,000 casualties. German losses are about 450,000.
Just for 10 miles. That's insane. Like I said, this is just so... Oh my goodness.
The Allies reassure themselves that this is a winning strategy, because at this rate, Germany will run out of men first. Meanwhile, disaster engulfs Romania, as the country is overrun by the Central Powers. Romanian forces suffer 250,000 casualties. The remnants of its army take position alongside the Russians on the Eastern Front. That winter, Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria since 1848, dies. He is succeeded by his son, Karl. In Britain, Prime Minister Herbert Asquith is forced from office and succeeded by David Lloyd George, while General Joffre is replaced as French Commander-in-Chief by General Nivelle, who promises victory through bold, aggressive action. Amid the comings and goings, US President Woodrow Wilson's attempts to mediate a peace settlement come to nothing. Neither side is willing to make concessions. Epic History TV.
I'm looking forward to covering the Battle of the Somme next. So once again, another brilliant video by the great Epic History TV, and I can't wait for the next time. So I'll for the most part just end the video here. I'll see you all then, everyone. Goodbye.